The silence was so quiet you could hear everything in the Birmingham arena that July evening. The stage lights had gone dark for the last time. The final music note had faded away into history. And somewhere behind the stage, a famous rock star was whispering 10 words that would stay with his wife, Sharon Osbourne, forever. Words so simple, but so meaningful. They showed exactly who this man was. Someone who had just given everything he had left to the city that helped make him famous one last time. "I can't believe this is how it all ends, Sharon." Those were the words Ozzy Osbourne said to his beloved wife of over 40 years after what none of them knew would be his last concert ever. July 2nd, 2025. A date that would forever be remembered as the end of an important time. The Prince of Darkness had come back home to Birmingham, the same streets where a young John Michael Osbourne once dreamed of getting away through music. Now everyone was watching his final goodbye. Sharon Osbourne's hands were shaking as she shared these personal details in a special interview just days after losing the love of her life. The woman who had stayed with Ozzy through many years of craziness, drug problems, health problems, and success was now left to share his final message with the world. But to understand how important those 10 words were, we need to go back through a love story that beat every challenge, survived every problem, and ended up becoming one of rock and roll's greatest romances. It was 1979 when Sharon first saw Ozzy Osbourne. He wasn't the worldwide superstar yet. He was a broken man who had just been kicked out of Black Sabbath, feeling sorry for himself and thinking his music career was over. Sharon, who was just 27 years old and the daughter of music manager Don Arden, saw something in this wild-looking crazy man that no one else could see. Not the newspaper stories, not the controversies, not the self-destruction, but the hurt artist underneath it all. Their first meeting was anything but romantic. Ozzy was passed out in his own throw-up on Sharon's father's office floor. Most people would have walked away. Sharon cleaned him up, got him awake enough to talk, and asked him a question that would change both their lives forever. "What do you want to do with your music?" That question started something in Ozzy that had been sleeping. Hope. From that moment, Sharon didn't just become his manager. She became the person who saved him. She saw what he could become when others just saw problems. She saw a solo career when others saw someone whose time was over. She saw the real man behind all the craziness. And slowly, carefully, she helped him see it too. Their work relationship quickly turned into something deeper, more complicated, more beautiful than either had ever known before. The early years of their romance were like a rock and roll fairy tale written in chaos. Sharon guided Ozzy's solo career with the tough determination of a woman in love, turning him from Black Sabbath's troubled ex-lead singer into a solo superstar. Albums like Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman weren't just musical comebacks. They were love letters to what could be possible, created by a partnership that believed in magic when the rest of the world had given up. But love in the Osbourne world was never easy. Ozzy's problems were real, dark, and never-ending. Alcohol and drugs weren't just bad habits. They were the ghosts of a poor working kid from Birmingham who never believed he was good enough for the life he was living. Sharon watched the man she loved fight these problems night after night, sometimes winning, often losing, but never giving up the fight completely. Their wedding day in 1982 was pure Ozzy and Sharon, different, passionate, and a little crazy. Instead of a traditional wedding, they made their promises in a small ceremony that was more about their private love than a big public show. Sharon wore a simple dress. Ozzy wore his worry about whether he was good enough to be happy. But in that moment, surrounded by just a few close friends, two hurt souls found something neither had ever experienced: love without conditions. The many years that followed were a perfect example of being partners through hard times. When Ozzy struggled with addiction, Sharon didn't just stand by him. She fought for him. When critics said bad things about his music, she became his strongest defender. When the world only saw the crazy train stunts and the bat-biting headlines, Sharon saw the gentle father who sang bedtime songs to their children and the husband who still left her love notes after 20 years of marriage. Their 3 children, Amy, Kelly, and Jack, grew up watching this complicated dance of love and chaos. They saw their father at his worst and their mother's never-ending strength in those moments. They also saw something the public rarely got to see: the quiet moments when Ozzy would hold Sharon's hand during his darkest times, when she would pet his hair during his panic attacks, when they would laugh together at private jokes that had kept them going through many years of problems. The reality show the Osbournes in the early 2000s gave the world a peek into their unusual family life, but it barely showed the deep, complicated love that held it all together. Behind the cameras, Sharon was fighting her own battles, a cancer diagnosis that she faced with the same tough determination she used to protect her family. And in those moments, it was Ozzy's turn to be the strength she had always been for him. As the years went by, new challenges came up. Ozzy's Parkinson's disease diagnosis in 2003 marked the beginning of a different kind of fight. The man who had ruled stages around the world was now fighting an enemy he couldn't beat with loudness and attitude. His hands, once steady enough to give legendary singing performances, began to shake. His walk, once powerful on stage, became wobbly. Sharon watched the love of her life fight this new war with the same bravery he had brought to every other battle. But this time was different. This wasn't addiction that could be beaten with determination and love. This wasn't controversy that could be survived with time. This was time itself, taking what it was owed from a man who had lived several lifetimes in 74 years. The decision to do a final tour was painful. Ozzy's body was giving out, but his spirit stayed strong. He wanted to say goodbye the right way, to give something back to the fans who had supported him through every success and problem. Sharon, always his protector, worried about how hard it would be on his body, but she also understood what music meant to her husband. It wasn't just his career. It was his soul turned into sound. The final tour was both a celebration and heartbreak. Night after night, Sharon watched from the side of the stage as Ozzy used every bit of strength he had left to give performances that went beyond his physical problems. His voice, worn but still powerful, carried many years of pain and happiness. His presence, though more fragile than before, still took over every room he entered. Birmingham was always going to be the end. It was where John Michael Osbourne had been born, where Black Sabbath had first practiced in a tiny rehearsal room, where a young man with big dreams and not many choices had first imagined a life beyond the steel factories and warehouse jobs. Coming home to Birmingham for his final show wasn't just poetic, it was meant to be. The preparation for that final Birmingham show was emotionally hard for the entire family. Sharon later shared that Ozzy barely slept the week before. He would sit in their hotel room, staring out at the city lights, talking about how strange it was that life had come full circle. He talked about the poor working neighborhoods where he'd grown up, about the first time he'd heard the Beatles and realized music could be more than just background noise, about the moment he understood that his voice, rough, untrained, but uniquely his, could move people. On the night of July 2nd, 2025, Birmingham's arena was electric with an energy that went beyond normal concert excitement. This wasn't just a show, it was a homecoming, a celebration, and a goodbye, all wrapped into one impossible-to-copy moment. Fans who had followed Ozzy for many years stood next to young people discovering the magic for the first time. The air itself seemed to buzz with excitement and love. When Ozzy walked onto that stage for the final time, Sharon was watching from her usual spot, close enough to help if needed, far enough away to let him have his moment with the audience that had given meaning to his life. She had watched him take that walk thousands of times before, but this time felt different. This time felt final. The performance itself was everything Ozzy had hoped for and everything Sharon had feared. He gave absolutely everything he had left, pouring many years of experience, pain, joy, and love into every song. His voice broke during the emotional moments, but it flew high during the big songs. His body struggled, but his spirit was bright and shining. For 2 hours, the Prince of Darkness reminded everyone, including himself, why he had become a legend. The final song was Paranoid, the Black Sabbath song that had started his journey into rock stardom. As the last notes rang out and the crowd's roar filled every corner of the arena, Ozzy stood at the edge of the stage, arms raised, taking in a moment he somehow knew he would never experience again. The man who had spent his life thinking he didn't deserve love was surrounded by tens of thousands of people proving him wrong. Backstage, after the show, the rush of energy that had carried Ozzy through the performance began to fade, and the physical reality of what he had just given set in. Sharon found him sitting in a quiet corner of his dressing room, still in his stage clothes, staring at nothing and everything. She sat beside him, taking his hand, a gesture that had comforted both of them through every crisis they had faced together. It was then, in that vulnerable moment between the public success and the private reality, that Ozzy spoke those 10 words that would echo in Sharon's heart forever. "I can't believe this is how it all ends, Sharon." The simplicity of the words hid their deep meaning. It wasn't just about the show ending or even about his career reaching its end. It was about a man looking back on a life that had been better than any expectation he had ever dared to have for himself. The boy from Birmingham who had expected to work in a factory until he died had instead traveled the world, touched millions of lives, and found a love story that had kept him going through everything life could throw at him. Sharon's response, she later shared, was equally simple but equally meaningful. She squeezed his hand and said, "It's not an ending, Oz. It's a completion." Those words seemed to comfort him in a way that nothing else could. The man who had spent his life running from his demons had finally outrun them. Not through escape, but through acceptance. The 3 weeks between that final show and Ozzy's death on July 22nd were, according to Sharon, some of the most peaceful of their entire relationship. They spent their days talking about memories, playing with their grandchildren, and enjoying the kind of quiet togetherness that only comes after many years of shared experiences. Ozzy's Parkinson's symptoms seemed to get better, as if his body was giving him one final gift of clearness and comfort. During those precious weeks, Ozzy often went back to thinking about that final show in Birmingham. He would tell Sharon stories about moments from the performance, how the crowd's energy had lifted him, how he had felt his father's presence watching from somewhere beyond, how the music had felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. He talked about feeling complete in a way he had never experienced before. Sharon treasures those conversations now, understanding that they were Ozzy's way of making peace with a life that had been anything but peaceful. He wasn't afraid of what was coming. He was thankful for what had been. The man who had once written songs about being paranoid and going crazy had found his final days a deep sense of happiness and acceptance. When the end came, it was as Sharon had always hoped it would be, peaceful, surrounded by love, and without the struggle that had been part of so much of his life. Ozzy passed away in his sleep with Sharon by his side, holding the same hand that had gripped microphones, written love letters, and fought through many years of battles, both public and private. Sharon's decision to share Ozzy's final words from that Birmingham show wasn't made easily. She struggled with whether such private moments should stay private, but finally she realized that those 10 words, "I can't believe this is how it all ends," Sharon, captured something everyone could understand about love, loss, and the beautiful disbelief that comes from a life lived fully. In the days following Ozzy's death, Sharon found herself going back to that moment backstage over and over again. Not because it brought her pain, but because it reminded her of something important. Their love story hadn't ended with his death. It had been completed. Every fight they had survived, every demon they had conquered together, every moment of joy they had shared, it all led to that final peaceful moment when Ozzy could look back on his life with wonder rather than regret. The public remembers Ozzy Osbourne as the Prince of Darkness, the man who bit the head off a bat, the reality TV dad, the heavy metal legend who inspired generations of musicians. All of those things are true, and all of them are important parts of his legacy. But Sharon's memories are different, more personal, more human. She remembers the man who cried during Casablanca every time they watched it together. She remembers the father who never missed a school play or soccer game when he was home. She remembers the husband who still brought her coffee in bed after 40 years of marriage, even when his hands shook from Parkinson's. She remembers the artist who never stopped being amazed that people connected with his music right up until his final performance. Those 10 words, "I can't believe this is how it all ends, Sharon," weren't a complaint. They were an expression of thankfulness disguised as disbelief. Ozzy Osbourne, the poor working-class kid from Birmingham who never expected to live past 30, had been given a life beyond his wildest dreams. He had found love that kept him going, music that made him happy, and family that kept him grounded. He had touched millions of lives and been touched by millions in return. As Sharon continues to live life without her partner of over 40 years, she carries those final words not as something heavy, but as a reminder of the amazing journey they shared. The story of Sharon and Ozzy Osbourne isn't just a rock and roll romance. It's proof of the life-changing power of believing in someone when they can't believe in themselves, of staying with love when love requires courage, and of finding beauty in chaos. The Prince of Darkness has taken his final bow, but the light he brought to Sharon's life, to his family, and to millions of fans around the world continues to shine. And somewhere in the quiet moments when Sharon misses him most, she can still hear his voice, not singing the heavy metal songs that made him famous, but speaking those 10 simple words that captured the wonder of a life lived in full partnership with the person who saw his light when all he could see was darkness. I can't believe this is how it all ends, Sharon. But it wasn't an ending. It was, as Sharon had told him, a completion. The completion of one of rock and roll's greatest love stories, told not just in music and headlines, but in the quiet moments between a husband and wife who prove that love, real love, can survive anything, even time itself.